Olivia Parker stood in front of the mirror wall at Summit Fitness, watching her reflection adjust the twisted strap of her sports bra for the third time that morning. The fabric had been rubbing against her shoulder blade for 20 minutes, creating a red line she could feel but couldn't see, without contorting herself in ways that would draw attention. She hated drawing attention. That was the entire point of coming to this gym at 6 in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays, before the post-work crowd flooded in with their loud playlists and their performance routines. But lately, even the early morning had become complicated. Across the weight room, near the rack of dumbbells arranged in ascending chrome rows, the new instructor was adjusting a bench press setup, his movements efficient and unhurried. His name tag read Jordan in block letters, but she'd avoided looking at it directly until yesterday, when he'd walked past her squat rack and said something she'd pretended not to hear. The detail that was wrong, the thing that had lodged itself in her awareness like a splinter, was the protein shaker on the bench beside her water bottle. It wasn't hers. The black bottle with the motivational quote printed in gold script, "Pressure makes diamonds," belonged to someone else. She'd picked it up by accident from the communal shelf near the locker room, and now it sat there, a small object that represented something larger and more irritating than a simple mix-up. It meant she'd been distracted. It meant her routine, her carefully constructed bubble of solitude and focus, had already been breached before she'd even started her first set. If you're watching this story unfold and wondering where it's headed, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. And drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? I'd love to know where this story is finding you today. Jordan moved through the gym with the ease of someone who understood the space as both workplace and second home. Olivia had been coming here for 8 months, long enough to recognize the regulars and avoid the ones who treated the free weights section like a social club. She'd chosen Summit Fitness precisely because it wasn't one of those boutique places with forced camaraderie and group challenges. It was a no-nonsense facility with good equipment and minimal staff interaction. Until 3 weeks ago, that's exactly what it had been. Then Jordan started his morning shifts, and suddenly there was someone paying attention to form, offering unsolicited corrections, and worst of all, making eye contact in a way that felt deliberate. She'd shut it down the first time. He'd approached while she was setting up for deadlifts, and before he could finish whatever coaching tip he'd been about to deliver, she'd cut him off with a flat, "I have a program. I don't need help." The words had come out sharper than she'd intended, but she hadn't corrected the tone. He'd nodded, stepped back, and said, "Got it. Let me know if that changes." Then he'd walked away without the wounded expression or the passive-aggressive commentary she'd learned to expect from men whose offers of assistance got declined. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because 2 days later, she'd been struggling with the last rep of her overhead press, her arms shaking with the effort of locking out the weight, and he'd appeared at her side without a word. He hadn't touched the bar, hadn't crowded her space, just positioned himself close enough to catch it if she failed. She'd completed the rep, racked the bar with more force than necessary, and turned to find him already stepping back. "Didn't ask," she'd said, her breath still coming hard. He'd met her eyes for a beat too long, something unreadable in his expression, then replied, "Didn't need to." And that had been worse somehow. Worse because it suggested he'd been watching, tracking her sets, noticing when she pushed past her usual limits. Worse because it meant the invisible wall she'd built around herself was visible to him, which meant it wasn't actually a wall at all. The protein shaker sat on the bench like evidence of her distraction. She picked it up, meaning to return it to the shelf, but when she lifted it, she felt the weight of liquid inside. Someone had left a mixed shake in there, probably from yesterday. The thought of the contents curdling in the closed container made her grimace. The locker room had a sink, but it also had Bethany, another regular who used the early morning slot to apply a full face of makeup and conduct long phone conversations on speaker. Olivia weighed her options and decided the sink in the gym's small staff office, the one behind the front desk, would be faster and quieter. She walked across the gym floor, keeping her gaze forward, aware in her peripheral vision that Jordan had finished with the bench press and was now restocking kettlebells. The front desk was empty. Rachel, the usual morning receptionist, was probably in the back office doing intake paperwork for new members. Olivia slipped behind the counter and pushed open the door marked Staff Only. The room was barely large enough to qualify as an office, more of a glorified closet with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a small sink in the corner. She turned on the water and began rinsing the shaker, watching the cloudy protein residue swirl down the drain. The smell was bad but not yet rancid. She'd caught it in time. That's when she heard the voices through the wall. The staff office shared a thin partition with the gym's equipment storage room, and sound carried more than people probably realized. She wouldn't have paid attention, except that she heard her own name. Olivia Parker. A woman's voice, unfamiliar. The one who comes in Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Then Rachel's voice, unmistakable with its slight southern drawl. Yeah, her. Jordan asked about her membership details yesterday, wanted to know how long she'd been coming here, whether she'd ever signed up for personal training sessions. Olivia's hands stilled under the running water. The voices continued, oblivious. That's weird, the unfamiliar woman said. Why would he need that information? Rachel laughed, a sound that carried an edge of something Olivia couldn't quite pass. I told him it was against policy to share member details without consent, but he kept pushing. Said he needed to know for programming purposes, whatever that means. I didn't give him anything specific, but he seemed really interested. Like, more interested than a normal trainer should be about someone who's made it clear she doesn't want training. The water was still running. Olivia turned it off, her pulse doing something irregular in her chest. The unfamiliar woman spoke again. You think he's just trying to upsell her on sessions? That's part of his job, right? Rachel's response was quieter, harder to make out, but Olivia caught enough. Maybe. Or maybe it's something else. I've seen guys develop fixations on members before, usually ends badly. Olivia set the protein shaker down on the edge of the sink, her fingers gripping the plastic harder than necessary. The word fixation sat heavy in her mind, activating every defensive instinct she'd spent years cultivating. She'd come to this gym specifically to avoid this kind of complication. The whole point of her life in the past 2 years had been simplification. Work as a freelance graphic designer, gym in the morning, groceries on Wednesday, minimal social obligations, maximum control. She'd rebuilt her routine from scratch after the collapse of her engagement to someone who'd confused attention with affection and surveillance with care. She'd learned to recognize the signs early, to shut down interest before it could escalate into expectation. And now here was Jordan, a gym instructor she'd spoken to maybe 4 times, asking about her membership details, watching her sets closely enough to position himself as a spotter without being asked. The protein shaker wasn't hers, but suddenly it felt like a symbol of something larger, of crossed boundaries and misplaced objects, and the way men convinced themselves that persistence was romantic when it was really just a refusal to hear the word no the first time it was spoken. She left the staff office through the same door she'd entered, moving quickly back to her bench. The protein shaker stayed behind on the sink's edge, abandoned. Let someone else deal with it. She had 3 more sets of Bulgarian split squats to finish, and then she was done. Done with the workout, done with this gym, done with the morning slot that had stopped feeling like a refuge and started feeling like a space where she was being observed without her consent. Jordan was still across the room, his back to her, organizing resistance bands on their wall hooks. Olivia finished her split squats in a mechanical haze, focusing on her breathing and her form and the burn in her quadriceps that meant the work was landing where it should. She didn't look at the mirror. She didn't look at him. She finished, packed her things into her gym bag, and walked out without stopping at the front desk. The parking lot was still mostly empty, the October morning air cool enough to make her skin prick with goosebumps. Her car was parked in its usual spot, 3rd row from the entrance, under the oak tree that provided shade in the summer and dropped acorns like small grenades in the fall. She unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat, her gym bag landing in the passenger side with a thud. Then she sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the gym's glass front entrance. She should cancel her membership. That was the logical response. She'd prepaid for 6 months when she'd joined, a decision motivated by the discount and the commitment device of sunk cost. But she could walk away from sunk cost. She'd done it before, with bigger things than a gym membership. The problem was that walking away felt like losing, like letting someone else's behavior dictate her choices. She'd built her mornings around this place. She knew the equipment, the flow of the space, the unspoken rules of the regulars. Starting over somewhere else meant breaking in a new routine, navigating new social dynamics, risking a new set of complications. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from her client, Meredith Hu, asking about the logo revisions for her bakery rebranding. Olivia had promised them by Friday. She typed a quick response confirming the timeline, then set the phone down and started the car. The decision about the gym could wait. She had work to do, and work had always been the one part of her life that stayed simple. Deliver good design, get paid, repeat. No one tracked her sets or asked intrusive questions or confused professional boundaries with personal interest. But that evening, after she'd finished the logo revisions and sent them off, after she'd eaten dinner alone at her small kitchen table and cleaned up the dishes with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd lived alone for 2 years, the conversation she'd overheard kept replaying in her mind. Jordan asked about her membership details. I've seen guys develop fixations on members before. The words had weight because they confirmed something she'd already suspected, something that had made her shoulders tense every time she'd walked into Summit Fitness over the past week. She opened her laptop and pulled up the gym's website, navigating to the staff page. Jordan's photo was there, 3rd row from the top, his professional headshot showing him in a Summit Fitness polo, his expression friendly but not overly familiar. The bio underneath was brief. Jordan Bennett, certified personal trainer, specializing in strength programming and athletic performance. 5 years of experience. Believes fitness should be accessible, challenging, and judgment-free. The phrase judgment-free felt ironic, given that he'd apparently been making judgments about her membership history behind her back. She clicked on the membership portal and logged into her account. The cancellation option was buried under 3 submenus, designed to create just enough friction that impulse cancellations were discouraged. She navigated through the steps, reading the terms. Cancellations required 30 days' notice. Early termination of the 6-month prepaid contract would result in a loss of the discount and a processing fee. She did the math in her head. Walking away would cost her approximately $200. Not insignificant, but not catastrophic either. Her cursor hovered over the Submit Cancellation Request button. Then she closed the laptop. She wasn't going to let Jordan Bennett cost her $200 and her morning routine. If anyone was leaving, it should be him. Or if not leaving, then at least getting a clear message that his attention was unwanted, inappropriate, and noticed. She could file a complaint with the gym management. Rachel had said Jordan's questions violated policy. That gave her leverage. But complaining felt like escalation, and escalation meant more attention, more involvement, more energy spent on someone who didn't deserve it. She'd learned that lesson the hard way with her ex-fiancé, who'd responded to her attempts to establish boundaries by accusing her of being cold, unreasonable, paranoid. The word fixation had been accurate then too, though it had taken her longer than it should have to recognize it. By the time she'd ended things, he'd been tracking her location through a shared app, showing up at her favorite coffee shop by coincidence, texting her friends to ask if she was okay because she'd seemed distant. The patterns were different with Jordan. No shared history, no romantic relationship to unravel, but the underlying dynamic felt familiar. A man deciding that his interest mattered more than her clearly stated disinterest. A man interpreting her boundaries as obstacles to overcome, rather than information to respect. A man who probably told himself he was being helpful, protective, attentive, all the words that sounded positive until you were on the receiving end of them and realized they were just synonyms for invasive. She went to bed that night with the problem unresolved, her mind cycling through scenarios and responses. In the morning, she'd make a decision. Either she'd go to the gym at her usual time and confront Jordan directly, or she'd shift her workout schedule to the afternoon when he wasn't there, or she'd cancel the membership despite the cost. Each option felt like a compromise, but maybe that's what adulthood was, choosing between imperfect solutions and living with the consequences. Sleep came in fragments. her subconscious offering up variations on the confrontation she was avoiding. In one version, she told him to leave her alone and he laughed, the sound echoing across the empty gym. In another, she filed a complaint and he denied everything, her overheard conversation reduced to hearsay without proof. In a third, she simply stopped coming and he took her absence as a victory. When her alarm went off at 5:30, she made herself get up, made herself pull on her workout clothes, made herself pack her gym bag, made herself drive to Summit Fitness with the same determination she'd used to meet a client deadline. The gym was a commitment. She didn't break commitments just because someone else made them uncomfortable. Jordan was already there when she arrived, standing near the front desk talking to Rachel. Their conversation stopped when Olivia walked through the entrance, and she felt the weight of their attention, like a physical pressure. She signed in on the tablet without looking at either of them and walked directly to the locker room. When she emerged, Jordan was in the weight room, but Rachel called out to her from behind the desk. "Olivia, can I talk to you for a second?" Olivia's first instinct was to keep walking, but something in Rachel's tone made her pause. She approached the desk, her gym bag still slung over her shoulder. "What's up?" Rachel glanced toward the weight room, then back to Olivia. Her expression was uncomfortable, almost apologetic. "I need to let you know that Jordan filed a formal incident report yesterday. He said you were in the staff office without permission, and he's concerned it might happen again." The words took a moment to land, to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. When they did, the sense they made was upside down, reversed, wrong. "I was returning a protein shaker to the sink," Olivia said slowly. "The staff office was the closest place with water access. I was there for maybe 2 minutes. Rachel nodded, but the apology in her expression deepened. "I know, and that's fine. Normally it wouldn't be an issue. But Jordan said he's noticed some concerning behavior from you over the past few weeks. He says you've been hostile toward him, that you've rejected his professional assistance in ways that seem personal rather than preferential, and that he's worried about his safety if you have access to staff-only areas." The gym bag slipped from Olivia's shoulder and hit the floor with a dull thud. Her brain was trying to catch up with what she was hearing, trying to map the words onto any version of reality that made sense. "His safety," she repeated. "He's worried about his safety. From me." Rachel looked miserable now, her hands fidgeting with a pen on the desk. "I'm sorry, I know it sounds ridiculous, but he filed a formal report, which means I have to follow protocol. I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but I do need to ask that you avoid the staff areas from now on. And if you have any issues with Jordan, please come to me first, instead of trying to handle them directly." The reversal was so complete, so perfectly executed, that Olivia almost admired it. He'd heard the conversation somehow. Maybe the thin walls worked both ways. Maybe he'd been in the storage room and heard her in the staff office, and he'd immediately repositioned himself as the victim. Now she was the threatening one, the unstable member with boundary issues and hostility problems. Her word against his, except his word was filed in an official report, and hers was just a complaint she hadn't even made yet. "I understand," Olivia said, because what else could she say? Arguing would only reinforce the narrative. Getting angry would prove his point. She picked up her gym bag and walked to the weight room, feeling Rachel's gaze follow her like a spotlight. Jordan wasn't looking at her, or at least he was doing a good job of pretending not to look. He was working with a middle-aged man on the leg press, demonstrating proper foot placement, his voice carrying across the gym with the calm authority of someone who had nothing to worry about. Olivia sat up at the squat rack farthest from him, loaded the bar with her usual weight, and began her warm-up sets. Every rep felt like an act of defiance. Every breath felt like proof that she wasn't going to be driven out by someone else's manipulation. But halfway through her third working set, her focus cracked. She was thinking about the incident report, about what other lies it might contain, about how easily he'd flipped the script. The bar felt heavier than it should, her legs shaking with more than just physical exertion. She racked the weight early, 2 reps short of her target, and sat down on the bench behind her. This was exactly what he wanted. Her distracted second-guessing herself, too rattled to finish her workout properly. The thought made her angry, and the anger helped. She stood up, approached the bar again, and finished the set she'd cut short. Then she added weight for the next set, more than she'd planned. enough that the last rep would be a genuine struggle. She needed the physical challenge to match the psychological one, needed to prove to herself that she could still push through when things got hard. The set was brutal. Her quads burned, her core shook with the effort of staying tight, and on the final rep, she had to pause at the bottom of the squat for a full 2 seconds before driving back up. But she made it. She racked the bar with a clang that echoed through the gym, loud enough that several people looked over, Jordan included. Their eyes met across the weight room. His expression was neutral, unreadable, but something passed between them in that moment, acknowledgement maybe, or challenge. She looked away first, not because she was backing down, but because she was done playing whatever game this had become. She finished the rest of her workout in mechanical silence, moving through exercises with the precision of someone who'd done them hundreds of times. When she was done, she went straight to the locker room, showered quickly, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. In her car, she sat with her hands on the steering wheel again, but this time she wasn't debating whether to stay or go. She was already gone, at least mentally. Summit Fitness had stopped being a gym and started being a battlefield, and she'd learned enough from her past to know that fighting on someone else's chosen terrain was a losing strategy. But cancelling still felt like defeat. So instead of cancelling, she'd shift. She'd come in the afternoons when Jordan wasn't working. She'd lose the quiet of the early morning slot, would have to navigate the crowds and the noise and the people who treated the gym like a social club. But she'd keep her membership and her routine. It wasn't the solution she wanted, but it was the solution that kept the most control in her hands. That afternoon she came back at 3 o'clock. The gym was crowded, as she'd expected. The weight room was full of people in various stages of their workouts, the air thick with effort, and the smell of sweat, and the sound of plates clanging against each other. Olivia found an empty squat rack, not her usual one but available, and started setting up. A woman on the neighboring bench press caught her eye and smiled. "First time at this hour? I haven't seen you here before." Olivia returned the smile with minimal commitment. "Just trying something different." "Well, welcome to the chaos," the woman said with a laugh. "I'm Jade, by the way. If you need a spotter or someone to work in with, just ask." "Thanks," Olivia said, and meant it, though she had no intention of taking Jade up on the offer. But the interaction was different from what she'd expected. Less intrusive, more collegial. Maybe the afternoon crowd wouldn't be so bad after all. She was halfway through her squats when she noticed something that made her pause. Across the gym, near the cardio section, Jordan was talking to Rachel. His shift shouldn't have started yet. He'd been working mornings, and it was only 3 in the afternoon. But there he was, gesturing animatedly, while Rachel nodded along, her expression serious. Olivia tried to ignore them, but her awareness kept snagging on their presence. They talked for several minutes. Then Jordan pulled out his phone and showed Rachel something on the screen. Rachel's expression shifted from serious to alarmed. She said something Olivia couldn't hear, and Jordan responded with what looked like reluctant agreement. Then Rachel disappeared into the staff office, and Jordan stayed by the cardio section, his gaze sweeping across the gym. When his eyes landed on Olivia, he didn't look away. Instead, he started walking toward her. Olivia's hands tightened on the barbell. She was mid-set, locked under the weight, vulnerable in a way that made her pulse spike, but she forced herself to breathe, to complete the rep, to rack the bar before he reached her. By the time he was standing next to her squat rack, she was standing upright, facing him directly. "We need to talk," Jordan said. His voice was low, urgent in a way that felt performative. "Somewhere private." "No," Olivia said flatly. "If you have something to say it here." He glanced around at the crowded gym, clearly uncomfortable with the audience. "It's about your safety and mine. Someone's been leaving threatening messages on the gym's voicemail, specifically about you and me." That got her attention despite herself. "What kind of messages?" Jordan pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times, then held it up so she could hear. The audio was garbled, the voice distorted through what sounded like a cheap voice modifier, but the words were clear enough. "Stay away from Olivia Parker. If you don't, you'll regret it." Then a click as the call ended. Olivia's stomach dropped. "When did you get this?" "Last night," Jordan said. "And another one this morning." Rachel's already called the police to file a report, but they said without more specific threats or evidence of who's making the calls, there's not much they can do except document it. The pieces were rearranging again, but this time Olivia couldn't see the pattern. Threatening voicemails didn't fit the narrative she'd been building about Jordan. They didn't fit any narrative that made sense. "Why would someone threaten you about me?" she asked, hearing the genuine confusion in her own voice. Jordan's expression shifted, something that might have been frustration or might have been concern. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Do you have an ex who might have a problem with you being here? Someone who'd see me as competition, even though we're not—" He stopped himself, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air between them. "No," Olivia said immediately. Then, more carefully, "I mean, I have an ex, but he's not like that. We ended things 2 years ago. He's moved on." She said it with confidence, but even as the words left her mouth, doubt crept in. Had he moved on? She'd blocked his number, unfriended him on social media, cut off all contact. She'd assumed that meant it was over for both of them, but she'd assumed a lot of things that had turned out to be wrong. Jordan seemed to read something in her face. "What's his name? The police might want to follow up." Olivia hesitated. Giving Jordan information about her ex felt like crossing a line, like admitting a connection she didn't want to acknowledge. But if someone was actually making threats, if there was a real safety issue and not just a manipulative game, then withholding information was stupid. "Trevor Ashford," she said finally, "but I really don't think he'd do something like this." Jordan typed the name into his phone. "Rachel's going to ask you about this too. She wants to review the security footage from the past few days, see if anyone's been hanging around who shouldn't be here." Security footage. The words triggered a memory, something she'd forgotten in the chaos of the past 24 hours. "Wait," Olivia said. "If there's security footage, then there's footage of me in the staff office yesterday, and footage of you asking Rachel about my membership details." Jordan's expression closed down, his face going carefully neutral. "I asked Rachel one question about how long you'd been a member. That's it. I was trying to figure out whether you were new and uncomfortable in the gym or whether you genuinely didn't want training assistance. That's part of my job." "Your job doesn't include filing incident reports about members who make you feel unsafe when you're the one tracking their activity," Olivia shot back. "I filed that report because you were in a staff-only area without permission," Jordan said, his voice hardening. "And because you've been hostile toward me since the day I started working here. I don't know what your problem is with me specifically, but I'm not going to apologize for protecting myself." They were drawing attention now. Jade had stopped mid-rep on the bench press and was watching them with poorly concealed interest. 2 other gym members had slowed their movements, their focus shifting from their workouts to the confrontation unfolding in the squat rack area. Olivia lowered her voice, forcing herself back under control. "I don't have a problem with you specifically. I have a problem with being noticed when I come here to not be noticed. I have a problem with trainers who don't respect the first no, and I really have a problem with being framed as a threat when I'm the one who's been trying to avoid you." For a moment, Jordan looked like he was going to argue. Then his shoulders dropped slightly, some of the defensive tension leaving his posture. "Okay," he said quietly. "Fair enough. I thought I was reading the situation one way, and you were experiencing it differently. That's on me for not checking my assumptions." The apology caught her off guard. She'd expected defensiveness, justification, the kind of circular argument that left everyone frustrated and nothing resolved. Instead, he'd just acknowledged the disconnect and taken responsibility for his part in it. It didn't erase the incident report or the discomfort of the past few weeks, but it shifted something. Before she could respond, Rachel emerged from the staff office, her face tight with stress. She walked quickly to where they were standing and addressed both of them. "I need you both to come to the office. The police are on their way. We've had another call, and this one was more specific." The police arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers in their late 30s who took statements with the weary efficiency of people who'd handled hundreds of similar calls. Olivia sat in the cramped staff office next to Jordan, both of them giving their versions of recent events, while one officer typed notes on a tablet and the other asked clarifying questions. When they got to the voicemail messages, the second officer, Officer Patterson, according to her name tag, asked to hear them directly. Rachel pulled them up on the gym's phone system, and the distorted voice played through the small speaker. 3 messages total, each one escalating in specificity. The third one, the one that had arrived while Olivia and Jordan were arguing by the squat rack, was the worst. "You think you can replace me? You think she wants someone like you? Stay away from Olivia Parker or I'll make sure you never work in this city again." The voice was still masked by the modifier, but there was something familiar in the cadence, the phrasing. Olivia felt ice slide down her spine. "That's Trevor," she said. "I don't know how I know, but I know. That's my ex." Officer Patterson stopped typing. "You're sure?" "The way he said someone like you," Olivia said slowly, working through the recognition as she spoke. "Trevor used to talk like that. He'd phrase things as questions when they were really accusations. And the part about replacing him, when we broke up, he kept saying I'd never find someone better, that no one would put up with my need for space. This sounds like him." Jordan was very still beside her. "Did he know you came to this gym?" "No," Olivia said. Then less certainly. "At least I never told him. We split up before I even joined. But he—" She stopped, the realization hitting her with physical force. "He had access to my Google account for a while. We shared a calendar when we were together, and I never went back and changed the password after we broke up. If he still has access, he could see my recurring calendar events, including my gym schedule." Officer Patterson and her partner exchanged a look. "We're going to need his full contact information," Patterson said, "and I'm going to recommend you change all your passwords immediately. If he has access to your calendar, he might have access to other information." The rest of the interview passed in a blur of details and documentation. Olivia provided Trevor's last known address, his phone number, his workplace. She answered questions about their relationship, about how it had ended, about whether there had been any contact since. When the officers finally left, promising to follow up within 48 hours, Olivia felt hollowed out, scraped clean of the anger and defensiveness that had sustained her for the past 2 days. Jordan walked with her back into the main gym. The afternoon crowd had thinned slightly, but Jade was still there, now on the rowing machine, watching them with unconcealed curiosity. "You okay?" Jordan asked. "I don't know," Olivia said honestly. "This isn't... I thought I was dealing with one problem, and it turns out I was dealing with a completely different problem." Jordan nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the incident report. About not backing off when you made it clear you wanted to be left alone. I convinced myself I was being professional, but you're right that I was pushing past boundaries. That wasn't okay." Olivia looked at him properly for the first time, seeing him as something other than an obstacle or a threat. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from stress rather than physical exertion. "I'm sorry too," she said, "for assuming the worst about you, for not giving you the benefit of the doubt." They stood there in the middle of the gym, the weights and machines humming with activity around them, neither quite sure how to bridge the gap between hostility and something else. Finally, Jordan said, "Do you want me to walk you to your car? Given everything with Trevor, it might be good to have someone with you." Olivia's first instinct was to refuse, to assert her independence and her capability. But her second instinct, the one that came from 2 years of living deliberately and choosing her battles carefully, told her that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was just sensible. "Yeah," she said, "that would be good." They walked to the parking lot together, not talking, just present. Olivia's car was still under the oak tree, acorns scattered across the hood like copper coins. Jordan waited while she unlocked the door and got in, then stepped back. "Text Rachel when you get home," he said, "so we know you made it safely." "I will," Olivia promised. Then, because the moment felt like it needed something more, "Thank you for not being the person I thought you were." Jordan's expression softened into something that might have been relief or might have been regret. "Thank you for giving me a chance to prove you wrong." Olivia drove home with her mind spinning through the afternoon's revelations. She'd been so focused on Jordan's attention that she'd missed Trevor's surveillance. She'd been so convinced that the threat was in front of her that she'd ignored the one coming from behind. By the time she pulled into her apartment complex, She'd already started mentally cataloguing every digital connection that needed to be severed, every password that needed to be changed, every piece of her life that Trevor might still have access to. Inside her apartment, she opened her laptop and began the process. Email password changed, calendar access revoked, social media accounts reviewed and secured, cloud storage permissions reset. It took 2 hours to work through everything, and with each change, she felt a mixture of anger and violation. He'd been watching her routines, tracking her schedule, possibly reading her emails and documents. For how long? And why now, after 2 years of silence? Her phone rang at 8:30. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Olivia Parker, a woman's voice, official sounding. This is Officer Patterson. I wanted to update you on the situation with Trevor Ashford. Olivia's heart rate kicked up. Did you find him? We did. He's been living about 20 miles from you in Riverside. When we went to his residence to ask about the phone calls, he initially denied involvement. But when we mentioned that we'd be getting a warrant for his phone records, he admitted to making the calls. Relief flooded through her, so intense it left her lightheaded. Is he going to be charged? That depends on a few factors, Patterson said carefully. The calls were threatening, but they were vague enough that prosecution might be difficult. However, he did admit to accessing your Google account without permission, which is a violation. We can definitely pursue charges for unauthorized access to a computer system. The question is whether you want to press charges or whether you'd prefer we issue a restraining order and leave it at that. Olivia didn't have to think about it. Both. I want a restraining order and I want to press charges. He needs to understand that this isn't something he can just apologize his way out of. Understood, Patterson said. I'll send you the paperwork. In the meantime, he's been warned to have no contact with you or with Jordan Bennett. He's also been banned from Summit Fitness and the surrounding area. If he violates any of these conditions, call us immediately. After the call ended, Olivia sat on her couch in the gathering dark, not bothering to turn on the lights. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. She felt wrung out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with her workout. But underneath the exhaustion was something else, a sense of clarity maybe, or closure. The threat was real, but it was also contained. Trevor had been found, confronted, and would face consequences. She wasn't in danger anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Jordan told me you got home safe. Officer Patterson called me too. Thank God they found Trevor. How are you holding up? Olivia typed a response. Tired, but okay. Thanks for handling everything today. I know it was a lot. Rachel's reply came quickly. Just doing my job. But listen, about the incident report Jordan filed, I'm going to remove it from your membership file. It was based on a misunderstanding, and given everything that's come to light, it's clear you weren't the problem. Thanks, Olivia wrote back. I appreciate that. She set her phone down and leaned back against the couch cushions. The past 48 hours had been a masterclass in misreading situations, in letting assumptions and past experiences color present realities. She'd been wrong about Jordan. He'd been clumsy about boundaries, yes, but not malicious, not threatening. Just someone trying to do his job and genuinely concerned when he thought a member might be struggling with form or safety. And he'd been right about her hostility being personal. It had been personal, rooted in her history with Trevor, and her determination never to be surveilled or controlled again. But she'd projected that history onto someone who didn't deserve it, had turned Jordan into a villain when the actual villain was someone she'd forgotten to guard against. The thought kept her awake that night, cycling through variations and what-ifs. What if she'd approached Jordan differently from the start? What if she'd given him a real explanation for why she didn't want training assistance instead of just shutting him down? What if she'd trusted her initial read of the situation, that he was persistent but not predatory, instead of letting her past experiences override her present judgment? By morning, she'd made a decision. She was going back to the early morning slot, not because Jordan would be there, though he would be, but because it was her time, her routine, her space. She wasn't going to let Trevor's interference cost her the one part of her day that had always been about her and her goals, and no one else's expectations. She arrived at Summit Fitness at 6 o'clock, earlier than usual. The parking lot was empty except for Rachel's car and one other vehicle she didn't recognize. Inside, the gym was quiet, the lights still on their dimmed overnight setting. Jordan was sitting at the front desk talking to Rachel, both of them cradling coffee cups that steamed in the cool, air-conditioned space. They both looked up when Olivia walked in. Rachel smiled, something warm and genuine in the expression. "Welcome back to the morning crew." "Glad to be back," Olivia said, and meant it. Jordan stood up, his coffee cup still in hand. "Can we talk for a minute, before you start your workout?" Olivia nodded, following him to one of the bench press stations in the corner of the weight room. He set his coffee down on the bench and turned to face her, his expression serious. "I wanted to say again that I'm sorry for how I handled things. I've been thinking about it a lot, about how I could have done better. You set a boundary, and I should have respected it completely instead of finding ways to work around it." "I appreciate that," Olivia said. "And I'm sorry too, for making you the target of my defensiveness when the actual problem was someone else entirely." Jordan nodded slowly. "We were both reacting to things that weren't actually happening between us. You thought I was tracking you. I thought you hated me personally. Turns out we were both wrong." "Turns out," Olivia agreed. She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I don't hate you. I never did. I have a history that made me see threats where they weren't. That's not your fault. And I have a job that sometimes makes me overstep when I think someone might benefit from guidance. That's not your fault either," Jordan said. He picked up his coffee cup, took a sip, then added, "So where do we go from here? I don't want to make you uncomfortable every time you come in, but I also don't want to pretend we're strangers after everything that's happened." Olivia considered the question. The easy answer would be to establish firm boundaries, to keep their interactions professional and minimal. But the easy answer didn't account for the fact that she'd spent 2 days convinced Jordan was a threat, and then watched him handle a genuinely dangerous situation with more maturity and grace than she'd given him credit for. It didn't account for the way he'd apologized without making excuses, or the way he'd walked her to her car without making a production of it. "We figure it out as we go," Olivia said finally. "I work out, you do your job. If I need help or advice, I'll ask. If you see me doing something dangerous, you can say something, but if I decline, you drop it. We treat each other like adults who are capable of communication without drama." Jordan extended his hand. "Deal." Olivia shook it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the firm grip that spoke of someone who meant what he said. Then she let go and headed to the squat rack to start her warm-up. The workout felt different, not easier exactly, but lighter somehow, as if the weight of misunderstanding had been adding resistance to every movement. Olivia moved through her sets with the focus she'd been missing, hitting her targets, feeling the good burn of muscles working properly. She was halfway through her deadlifts when Jordan appeared at the edge of her space, not crowding, just present. "Your hips coming up early on the pull," he said. "You might want to reset your starting position so your shoulders are more over the bar." Olivia paused, considered the feedback, then adjusted her stance. The next rep felt cleaner, the bar path more vertical. "Better?" she asked. "Better," Jordan confirmed. Then he walked away, no lingering, no expectation of gratitude or further conversation, just a coach offering a cue and a lifter taking it. By the time Olivia finished her workout, the early morning crowd was starting to trickle in. She recognized a few regulars, nodded to the ones who made eye contact, and headed to the locker room. When she emerged, showered and changed, Jordan was working with an older gentleman on the leg press, his attention fully on his client's form and breathing. Olivia stopped at the front desk to sign out. Rachel looked up from her computer and smiled. "Good workout?" "Great workout," Olivia said. "Best I've had in weeks." "Glad to hear it," Rachel said. Then, more quietly, "Jordan's a good guy, you know. He really was worried about you, even when things got complicated." Olivia thought about the incident report, about the assumption of threat, about how quickly things could spiral when people operated on incomplete information. "I know," she said. "We figured that out." She left the gym with the protein shaker thought still floating in her mind. the one that had started this whole cascade of misunderstanding. She'd never found out whose shaker it actually was, and now it didn't matter. It had been a placeholder, a symbol of distraction and crossed wires, and the way small objects could become weighted with meaning they never actually carried. Over the next few weeks, a routine established itself. Olivia came to the gym at 6 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Jordan worked his shift, helped members, occasionally offered her a form cue that she sometimes took and sometimes didn't. They weren't friends exactly, but they weren't strangers either. They existed in a space somewhere between the two, a space defined by mutual respect and the memory of having gotten each other wrong. Trevor's case moved through the legal system with the slow inevitability of bureaucracy. The restraining order was issued. The charges for unauthorized computer access were filed. Olivia attended one court date, sat in the gallery while Trevor pled guilty to reduced charges, watched him receive probation and a fine and a warning that any violation would result in jail time. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow, as if the act of being held accountable had shrunk him. When it was over, when she walked out of the courthouse into the bright November afternoon, she felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication, not even closure. Just the simple relief of a problem resolved, a threat neutralized, a chapter finished. She went to the gym that evening, an off-schedule visit motivated by restlessness and the need to move her body after sitting in a courtroom for 3 hours. The afternoon crowd was in full swing, the weight room crowded and loud. Olivia found an empty squat rack and started her warm-up, letting the familiar rhythm of the workout pull her back into herself. She was on her third working set when Jordan appeared, moving through the gym between clients. He paused near her rack, watching her finish the set, then approached. "Court went okay?" he asked. Olivia racked the bar and turned to face him. "How did you know I had court today?" "Rachel mentioned it, said you'd probably be in later if you came at all." Jordan's expression was careful, neutral. "I wasn't sure if you'd want company or space, so I figured I'd just check in." "It went fine," Olivia said. "He pled guilty, got probation, it's done." Jordan nodded. "That's good, that's really good." He hesitated, then added, "Listen, I know this is probably terrible timing, but I've been wanting to ask you something for a while now, and I keep talking myself out of it. But I figure after everything we've been through, the worst you can do is say no." Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a combination of curiosity and caution. "What is it?" "There's a powerlifting meet next month at the community center downtown," Jordan said, the words coming faster now as if he needed to get them out before he reconsidered. "I've got a few clients competing, and I'm going to be there spotting and loading. I thought maybe you'd want to come watch, see what it's like. No pressure to compete yourself, just I think you'd be interested in the atmosphere, the technique, and if you wanted company, I'd be around." It wasn't the question Olivia had expected, and the surprise of it made her smile. "You're asking me to a powerlifting meet?" "I'm asking you to a powerlifting meet," Jordan confirmed, his own smile breaking through. "As friends, as gym people who have a complicated history and are trying to figure out what normal looks like, as whatever makes sense to you." Olivia considered it. The old version of herself, the one who'd walked into Summit Fitness 8 months ago determined to remain invisible and autonomous, would have declined immediately. But that version had been operating on the assumption that attention always led to control and interest, always led to intrusion. She'd learned in the past few weeks that those assumptions were reductive, that the world was more complicated than her defense mechanisms allowed for. "Okay," she said. "Send me the details. I'll be there." Jordan's smile widened into something genuine and unguarded. "Yeah? Okay, great. I'll text you the information." He walked away before the moment could become awkward, leaving Olivia alone with her squat rack and the realization that she'd just agreed to spend time with Jordan outside the gym. Not as client and trainer, not as antagonists who'd resolved their conflict, but as two people who'd stumbled through misunderstanding into something that might become friendship. The powerlifting meet was exactly what Jordan had promised, loud, intense, and fascinating. Olivia sat in the stands with a handful of other spectators and watched lifters attempt weights that seemed physically impossible. Jordan moved between the warm-up area and the platform, spotting his clients, loading plates, offering quiet encouragement. When he had downtime, He sat next to Olivia and explained the technical details of each lift, the rules of the sport, the strategy behind attempt selection. They got coffee afterward at a diner near the community center, sitting across from each other in a booth with cracked vinyl seats. The conversation was easy in a way that surprised them both, flowing from lifting technique to gym culture, to the broader question of why people pursued physical challenges that hurt and exhausted them. "For me, it's about trust," Jordan said, stirring cream into his coffee. "Trusting my body to do what I've trained it to do, trusting the process even when progress is slow, trusting that if I put in the work, the results will come eventually." Olivia thought about her own relationship with training, about the way she'd used the gym as a sanctuary and a statement. "For me, it's about autonomy," she said. "I lift weights because the outcome depends entirely on what I do. No one else can do the reps for me. No one else can take credit for my progress. It's mine." Jordan nodded slowly, understanding crossing his face. "That makes sense, given your history. You needed something that was completely under your control." "I still need that," Olivia said, "but I'm starting to realize that autonomy doesn't have to mean isolation. I can be independent and still accept help when it's offered in good faith." They stayed at the diner until closing, talking through the small revelations and larger realizations that had shaped the past few months. When they finally left, walking to their cars in the cold December night, Jordan said, "This was good. We should do it again sometime." "We should," Olivia agreed. Then, because the evening had made her bold, but maybe without the powerlifting meat as an excuse, maybe just coffee. Jordan's expression in the parking lot lights was soft, hopeful in a way that didn't feel threatening. Just coffee sounds perfect. They started meeting for coffee on Saturday mornings, a new routine layered onto the existing one. The gym remained Olivia's space for solitary work and physical challenge, but the coffee shop became a space for conversation and connection. They talked about their lives outside the gym, Jordan's family in Atlanta, his decision to move to the city for a change of scene, his certification journey, his goals for eventually opening his own training facility. Olivia talked about her freelance design work, about the challenge of building a business while maintaining boundaries with clients who thought paying for services meant unlimited access to her time. The more they talked, the more Olivia found herself thinking about him outside of their scheduled meetings. She'd catch herself remembering something he'd said, wanting to text him about a client interaction or a particularly good workout. She'd replay their conversations in her mind at night, analyzing the way he listened without interrupting, the way he asked questions that showed genuine interest rather than performative engagement. It took her 3 weeks to recognize what was happening. She was developing feelings for Jordan, real feelings, the kind that made her stomach flip when she saw his name on her phone screen and made her care about looking put together on Saturday mornings, even though it was just coffee. The realization was terrifying in its simplicity. After everything she'd done to protect herself, after all the walls she'd built and the boundaries she'd defended, she was falling for someone who'd started as a perceived threat. The irony wasn't lost on her. It was January when things shifted again. Olivia was at the gym on a Tuesday morning working through her usual routine when she noticed the protein shaker sitting on the bench near her squat rack. The black bottle with gold script, "Pressure makes diamonds," the same one she'd abandoned in the staff office sink months ago. Someone had cleaned it, returned it to the communal shelf, and now here it was again, in her space, a reminder of how everything had started. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. The weight was different now, empty, clean, just an object without meaning. But looking at it triggered a cascade of memories. The morning she'd overheard Rachel and the other woman talking, the panic she'd felt about Jordan's interest, the incident report, Trevor's voicemails, the police interviews, the slow unwinding of misunderstanding into clarity. Jordan appeared at her elbow, startling her out of her thoughts. "You okay? You've been staring at that shaker for like 2 minutes." Olivia laughed, a sound that surprised them both. "Do you remember this thing? This is where it all started in a way. I took it into the staff office to clean it, and that's when I overheard Rachel talking about you asking about my membership." Jordan took the shaker from her hands, examined it. "Pressure makes diamonds," he read aloud. "Appropriate, given what we put each other through." He handed it back to her. "You should keep it. As a souvenir of our complicated beginning. I don't think I want a souvenir of that time, Olivia said, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. The past few months had been difficult, yes, but they'd also been clarifying. They'd forced her to examine her assumptions, to separate past trauma from present reality, to recognize that not every man who showed interest was Trevor in a different form. Fair enough, Jordan said. Then, more carefully, can I ask you something? Always, Olivia said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. These Saturday coffees, Jordan began, his voice lower now, more tentative. Are they just friend coffees? Or are they something else that we're both pretending is just friend coffees? Olivia's heart did that flip again, stronger this time. This was the moment where she could play it safe, could keep the boundaries clear and the expectations manageable. Or she could be honest about what had been building between them since that afternoon at the diner, since the powerlifting meet, since the first Saturday morning when they'd talked for 3 hours and lost track of time. I think there's something else, she said quietly. I think they've been something else for a while now, and I've been too scared to admit it. Jordan's expression shifted, relief and hope mixing with something deeper. Scared because of Trevor, or scared because of me? Scared because wanting someone means giving them the power to hurt you, Olivia said. And I swore after Trevor that I'd never give anyone that power again. But then you happened, and you kept happening, and now I replay our conversations at night and think about you more than is probably reasonable for someone who's supposed to be just a gym friend. The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and exposed. Jordan stepped closer, closing the distance but not touching, giving her space to breathe and think and choose. I replay our conversations too, he said. I think about you constantly, about what you said, how you laughed, the way you argued with me about squat depth that one time, because you were convinced I was wrong about the biomechanics. You were wrong about the biomechanics, Olivia said, but she was smiling now, something loosening in her chest. I was absolutely wrong, Jordan agreed, and I loved that you called me on it. I love that you don't just take my word for things because I'm a trainer. I love... He stopped himself, the unfinished sentence carrying more weight than the completed one would have. Olivia understood what he wasn't saying, what he was holding back because saying it felt too soon or too much or too risky. But she also understood that risk was part of the equation, that trust meant accepting vulnerability, that the only way forward was to choose connection over protection. I want to try this, she said, not the gym thing, not the coffee thing, but the actual relationship thing. I want to see where this goes, even though it terrifies me, but I need you to understand that I'm going to be difficult sometimes. I'm going to need space, and I'm going to have moments where I get defensive over things that don't deserve defensiveness, because my instinct is still to protect myself first. I can work with that, Jordan said, as long as you understand that I'm going to mess up sometimes. I'm going to push when I should pull back, or miss cues when I should be paying attention, because I'm still learning how to be with someone who's been through what you've been through. But I'm willing to learn. I want to learn. Olivia set the protein shaker down on the bench. Then, in a gesture that felt both monumental and completely natural, she stepped into Jordan's space and kissed him. It was brief, almost chaste, but it carried the weight of every conversation they'd had, every misunderstanding they'd worked through, every moment of honesty they'd chosen over self-protection. When she pulled back, Jordan was smiling. So, is Saturday still coffee? Or is it officially a date? It's officially a date, Olivia said. It's been a date for weeks. We were just too stubborn to admit it. They finished their workout together that morning, not as trainer and client, not as former antagonists who'd found common ground, but as two people building something new on the foundation of everything they'd survived. Olivia hit a new personal record on her squats, and Jordan was there to spot the final rep, his hands hovering near the bar but not touching, trusting her to complete the lift on her own. The months that followed were a study in learning each other's rhythms. Jordan learned that Olivia needed advance notice before social events, that she communicated better through text than phone calls when processing difficult emotions, that her need for space wasn't rejection, but restoration. Olivia learned that Jordan processed through conversation, that he showed care through small practical gestures, like making sure her car had gas before a long trip or restocking her favorite protein powder when he noticed she was running low, that his persistence came from optimism rather than control. They had their difficult moments. In February, Jordan invited Olivia to meet his family when they visited from Atlanta, and she'd panicked, invented a work deadline, and avoided his calls for 2 days. When they finally talked, she'd been defensive and he'd been hurt, and they'd spent hours working through the fear that had driven her retreat. In March, Olivia had overheard Jordan talking to another trainer about a female client, and her immediate assumption had been that he was interested in the client romantically. The argument that followed had been sharp and clarifying, forcing both of them to examine their triggers and communicate their boundaries more clearly. But they worked through each complication with the same determination they'd brought to their workouts, showing up, doing the hard reps, trusting the process even when progress felt slow. By April, Olivia had met Jordan's family. By May, Jordan had met Olivia's small circle of friends and passed their scrutiny with a combination of charm and genuine interest. By June, they'd established a rhythm that felt sustainable. Saturday dates, Tuesday and Thursday morning gym sessions, Wednesday dinners at one of their apartments, and space for their individual routines and needs. The protein shaker became a running joke between them. Jordan had indeed given it to Olivia, who'd kept it despite her initial resistance. She used it for her post-workout shakes, and every time she did, she thought about how something so small had catalyzed something so significant. Pressure makes diamonds, the gold script reminded her. And pressure had made this, had taken two people who'd misread each other completely and forged them into something stronger through conflict and honesty and the willingness to be wrong. In July, the gym held its annual summer barbecue in the parking lot, a tradition Olivia had always avoided. But this year, Jordan convinced her to come, and she found herself standing near the grill with a plate of food, watching him move through the crowd with easy confidence. Rachel approached her, carrying 2 beers, and handed one to Olivia. "You know," Rachel said, "when all that stuff went down last fall, I wasn't sure how it was going to resolve. I've seen gym drama destroy member relationships and staff dynamics, but you two figured it out." "We had help," Olivia said, "and consequences that forced us to get honest." Rachel clinked her beer against Olivia's. "Well, whatever the reason, I'm glad. Jordan's been happier in the past few months than I've seen him since he started here. And you seem lighter somehow, like you're not carrying as much weight." Olivia considered that. She did feel lighter, though not in the way Rachel probably meant. The literal weight she lifted had increased. She'd added 50 pounds to her squat since January, 30 to her deadlift. But the metaphorical weight, the constant vigilance and defensive anticipation she'd carried since Trevor, had lessened. Not disappeared. She didn't think it would ever fully disappear, but reduced to something manageable, something that no longer dictated every interaction and assumption. "I'm learning to trust my judgment again," Olivia said, "and to distinguish between caution and paranoia." Jordan appeared at her side, sliding an arm around her waist in a gesture that had become familiar and welcome. "You two talking about me?" he asked with mock suspicion. "Always," Rachel said with a grin. Then she excused herself to help with the grill, leaving Olivia and Jordan alone in the crowd. They stayed at the barbecue for 2 hours, longer than Olivia had planned, but not uncomfortably so. When they finally left, the sun was setting, painting the parking lot in shades of amber and rose. They walked to Olivia's car, still parked under the oak tree, though now she sometimes parked next to Jordan's truck instead, and stood there for a moment, not quite ready to separate for the evening. "Come home with me," Jordan said. Not a demand, not a pressure, just an invitation that Olivia could accept or decline based on what felt right. "Okay," she said, "but I need to leave by 10. I have a client call in the morning." 10 works, Jordan agreed. Then, because they'd learned that clarity prevented misunderstanding, just to be together, watch something, talk, whatever feels good. No expectations beyond that. Olivia smiled, appreciating the specificity, the way he'd learned to name what he wanted while leaving space for her to name what she needed. That sounds perfect. They drove separately to Jordan's apartment, a small 2-bedroom in a complex near the gym. Inside, the space was tidy but lived in, weights stacked in the corner. a foam roller propped against the couch, books about exercise science and business development piled on the coffee table. Olivia had been here dozens of times by now, but each visit still felt like discovering something new. A photograph of Jordan's family she hadn't noticed before, a coffee mug from a certification course, evidence of a life that was becoming intertwined with hers. They settled on the couch, Olivia tucking herself against Jordan's side, his arm around her shoulders. The TV played something neither of them was fully watching, background noise for the comfortable silence that had replaced the tense standoffs of their early encounters. Olivia let herself relax into the moment, let herself feel the safety of being held without being controlled, the warmth of being wanted without being surveilled. "I'm glad we didn't give up on each other," she said into the quiet. Jordan's hand traced patterns on her shoulder, absent and soothing. "I'm glad you gave me a second chance after I screwed up the first impression so badly." "You didn't screw up that badly," Olivia said. "I was just primed to see screwing up where it didn't exist." "We both brought our histories into that first interaction," Jordan said, "but we figured out how to see past them." They stayed like that until 9:30, when Olivia reluctantly extracted herself from Jordan's embrace and gathered her things. He walked her to the door, kissed her goodbye, with the tenderness of someone who understood that every goodbye was temporary, that they'd see each other again in less than 12 hours at the gym. "Text me when you get home," he said, the same words he'd said months ago in a different context with different meaning. "I will," Olivia promised. And she did, the text arriving as Jordan was getting ready for bed. "Home safe, see you tomorrow morning, thank you for today." His response came immediately. "Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Sleep well." Olivia fell asleep that night, thinking about the journey from "don't flirt with me" to "come home with me," from defensive hostility to deliberate vulnerability. The path hadn't been linear or simple, had required both of them to examine their assumptions and behaviors and make different choices. But the destination had been worth the difficulty of the route. The epilogue came in August, on a Tuesday morning at the gym. Olivia was setting up for deadlifts when she noticed a new member struggling with the bar setup, her grip placement wrong in a way that would lead to either a failed lift or an injury. The old Olivia would have looked away, respected the woman's autonomy to figure it out herself or ask for help if she wanted it. But the new Olivia, the one who'd learned that offering help wasn't always intrusive if done respectfully, approached the woman. "Hey," Olivia said, keeping her tone casual. "Mind if I offer a quick form tip? No pressure if you'd rather work it out on your own." The woman looked up, startled, then grateful. "Please, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is my first time trying deadlifts without a trainer." Olivia spent 5 minutes explaining grip placement, bar path, and breathing technique. The woman, Melissa, she introduced herself, listened attentively, tried the adjustments, and completed a smooth rep. "Thank you so much," Melissa said. "I was about to give up and go back to machines." "The learning curve is steep," Olivia said, "but you'll get it. Just give yourself time." As Olivia walked back to her own setup, she caught Jordan watching from across the gym, a smile playing at his lips. He gave her a subtle thumbs up, acknowledging the growth she'd demonstrated, the way she'd extended to someone else, the grace she'd eventually learned to accept for herself. Later that day, Olivia received an email from a potential new client, a startup founder who wanted branding work for her company. The initial message was friendly but pushy, asking for a preliminary meeting as soon as possible, and suggesting they connect over coffee to get to know each other before discussing the actual project. The old Olivia would have declined immediately, seeing manipulation in the friendliness and boundary violation in the coffee suggestion. But the new Olivia read the message more carefully, noticed the genuine enthusiasm beneath the eagerness, and recognized that not every request for connection was a threat to her autonomy. She responded with a professional email outlining her process, her rates, and her availability for an initial consultation via video call, not coffee, scheduled for the following week. The startup founder accepted the terms without pushback, and the project ended up being one of the most creatively fulfilling assignments Olivia had worked on in months. That evening, she met Jordan for dinner at their favorite Thai restaurant, a small place with cramped tables and food that was consistently excellent. Over pad thai and green curry, She told him about the potential client, about the moment of hesitation when she'd almost declined out of habit rather than assessment. "But you didn't," Jordan said. "You paused, evaluated, and made a choice based on the actual situation instead of your past experiences. That's huge." "It felt huge," Olivia admitted, "like I'm finally learning to distinguish between caution and avoidance." Jordan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You're learning to trust yourself again. That's what I see happening. You're trusting your judgment to tell you when something's actually wrong versus when it's just unfamiliar." Olivia squeezed his hand, appreciating the observation, the way he saw her growth without diminishing the work it had required. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "Without us working through all our misunderstandings. You taught me that people can be persistent without being predatory, interested without being intrusive. And you taught me that boundaries are important even when they feel inconvenient," Jordan said. "That respecting someone's no is more important than my desire to be helpful." They finished dinner and walked to the parking lot, the August evening warm and humid around them. Olivia's car was parked next to Jordan's truck, a deliberate choice she made most days now, parking near him instead of away from him, choosing proximity over isolation. "What are you thinking about?" Jordan asked, noticing the contemplative expression on her face. "I'm thinking about that first morning," Olivia said, "when I told you I didn't need help. About how convinced I was that you were going to be a problem, and about how wrong I was, even though I was also a little bit right." "You were right that I needed to back off," Jordan said. "Wrong about my intentions, right about my execution. We were both operating on incomplete information." "But we figured it out," Olivia said. "We got curious instead of defensive. We asked questions instead of making assumptions. We gave each other chances to be better than our worst moments." Jordan pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her in the parking lot's fluorescent light. "We did, and we're still figuring it out. That's the part I like best, knowing that we're building something together instead of trying to fit into something that already exists." Olivia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. In that moment, surrounded by the mundane reality of a restaurant parking lot and the lingering smell of Thai food and the distant sound of traffic, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who'd never been hurt, but the earned hope of someone who'd been broken and had learned to rebuild with better materials and stronger foundations. "I love you," she said, the words coming out easier than she'd expected. She'd been thinking them for weeks, but hadn't been ready to speak them until now. Until this specific moment in this specific parking lot with this specific person who'd somehow become essential to her life. Jordan's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. Have for a while now. Was just waiting for the right time to say it." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while the world continued around them. Then Olivia pulled back, looked up at Jordan's face in the artificial light and smiled. "So what happens now?" "Now we keep going," Jordan said simply. "We keep showing up for each other. We keep working through the hard stuff. We keep building this thing we're building one day at a time." "One day at a time," Olivia repeated, and the phrase felt like a promise and a commitment and a release all at once. They said goodnight in the parking lot, kissing with the ease of people who knew they'd see each other again soon, who didn't need to cling because they trusted in the continuity of what they'd created. Olivia drove home with the windows down, the warm air streaming through the car, her mind already replaying the evening, his words, her words, the way he'd held her, the way she'd let herself be held. When she got home, she made her usual post-workout shake using the black protein bottle with the gold script. "Pressure makes diamonds," she read aloud to her empty apartment. The words felt true, in a way they hadn't at the beginning, when pressure had just meant stress and difficulty and things to be avoided. Now pressure meant growth, challenge, the necessary force that transformed potential into reality. She thought about texting Jordan, about sharing the observation, but decided to save it for tomorrow. They'd have coffee on Saturday, they'd train together on Thursday, they'd have dinner sometime next week. The future stretched ahead of them, full of mundane moments and significant milestones, ordinary days and extraordinary breakthroughs. Outside her window, the city hummed with its nighttime rhythm. Olivia finished her shake, washed the protein bottle, and set it on the counter to dry. Tomorrow she'd use it again. Tomorrow she'd go to the gym. Tomorrow she'd see Jordan. Tomorrow she'd continue building the life she'd started reconstructing 2 years ago when her engagement ended, and she'd decided that safety meant solitude. She'd been wrong about that last part. Safety didn't mean solitude. It meant choosing connection with people who respected boundaries, who learned from mistakes, who showed up consistently even when things got complicated. It meant trusting her judgment enough to distinguish between real threats and echoes of past trauma. It meant letting someone in without losing herself in the process. And if sometimes she still felt the old defensiveness rising, the instinct to retreat before she could be hurt, she had tools now to work through it. She had Jordan, who'd proven his trustworthiness through months of patient consistency. She had her own hard-won self-knowledge, the understanding that her reactions were valid, even when they weren't proportional to the present situation. She had a future that was still being written, still open to revision and improvement and surprise. The last thought she had before falling asleep was about the question Jordan had asked in the gym all those months ago. "Do you need anything?" She'd said no then, had believed it with absolute conviction. But now, lying in the darkness of her bedroom, she understood that she'd been answering the wrong question. The question wasn't whether she needed anything. The question was whether she was willing to accept help when it was offered in good faith, whether she could build a life that included both autonomy and connection, strength and vulnerability, independence and love. The answer, she'd discovered, was yes. And that answer had changed everything.